The movie is set in France around the 19th century and focuses on a beautiful girl called Marie who is getting ready to meet her lover, Pierre. Two of her sisters join her in front of the mirror and make a comment that men would adore them if only they were blonde instead of brunette. While the girls giggle with each other, Pierre watches them through the window before Jose Maria, Marie's father, interrupts him and stops him from spying any further. As family and friends' father, Marie's mother approaches Henri, her daughter's other suitor, and asks him if he had recently written a poem. When he confirms, she asks him to read it out loud for everyone, and he recites one of his poems as she listens intently. While the others move to the common area, Marie takes Pierre into a private place so they can be alone. Right when they're about to kiss, Marie's mother walks in and interrupts them. That night, Pierre writes to his friend Henri about their shared love for Marie and explains that the only way to end their rivalry is for them to confess to her. The next day, Henri arrives at Marie's house and comes clean about his feelings for her through a telegram. When he hears what his best friend has done, Pierre goes over to Henri's house and confronts him about his actions. Although he admits that he had betrayed his friend, the love he had for Marie was stronger than any friendship. Pierre tells his friend that for him love is nothing more than a gratification of the senses, which makes Henri suspicious that Pierre had never truly loved before. Months later, Henri and Marie are married and have started living together. One night, as she returns from going out to a cafe with her sister, Henri comments that women didn't go to cafes unaccompanied by men. He then continues to tell her that Pierre had returned from his vacation and brought with him a beautiful woman from Algeria. Marie finds the news unsavory and chooses to avoid the conversation. At Pierre's home, he shows off his new woman to all of his friends. The girl seems too comfortable with her body and begins to entertain the men by getting half naked, and doesn't mind pleasuring one of his friends. The following day, Marie comes over to Pierre's house and is greeted by his new woman, Zora. After looking around his house, she tells Pierre that his house was missing flowers and gives the woman money and asks her to go buy some so she can have some privacy with the man. Once Zora leaves, Pierre asks Marie if she was jealous while smiling slyly. Marie tells him that she picked him, but her parents had chosen Henri. After expressing how upset he was that Henri stole her, he starts kissing her and they fall into bed together. The two lovers decide to form a system where they would be able to communicate through the newspaper ads so that their fraternizing won't be discovered. In one of her messages to Pierre, she expresses her desire to be photographed in the most immoral way possible, so he calls her over one day to do just that. Before they begin, he takes a normal portrait of her face so he can capture her innocence. Then, kneeling in front of her, he expresses his desire to be her lover if he cannot be her husband and asks her to write to him about her enjoyment. Once he has the film and camera ready, he has Marie strip down and pause in different erotic ways all over his apartment. After she had left, Pierre spends hours developing the film and finally has a beautiful result. Later, Pierre goes to visit Henri at his house just as Marie was coming in. When her husband comments that she was late, she humorously tells him that she was with her lover and he wouldn't let her go. As they lounge in the living room, Henri tells his friend that everyday life with Marie has made him incredibly happy. While Henri goes to the other room to get their wedding pictures, Marie kisses her lover and asks him if she could return to his studio, promising that she would be on her best behavior. As soon as they hear Henri's footsteps, the lovers separate, pretending like they hadn't done anything. When Pierre returns to his home, he meets up with his friend Jean and shows him the detailed book where he keeps pictures of the naked women he had slept with and information about them. As Jean flips through the pages, he sees hundreds of pictures of women in different erotic poses. The next time Pierre and Marie spend time at his house and on his bed, Pierre suggests that they introduce another woman into their relationship. Marie is upset and asks if he had other mistresses, which he confirms. He then continues to tell her that his love for her would never decrease even if he was seeing another woman. Back at her house, Marie hears Henri and her parents speaking about Pierre's new book called The Woman and the Doll. Henri explains the protagonist was a dark-haired beauty much like herself. The following day, Marie arrives at Pierre's house while it was empty and starts sneaking around. In his closet, she finds the book he keeps hidden away from all the pictures of naked women. When he returns home, she lets him take more nude pictures of her before asking him if she was now just part of his collection. Ignoring the question, he holds her in his arms and they fall back into bed. This practice continues for weeks. One night, Henri and Marie, as well as dozens of people including their friends, are invited to a ball when she sees Pierre with his mistress Zora. The sight is too much for her and she decides to go home but is stopped by her furious husband. After making it clear that people were watching, he warns her not to make a scene. As they go back up the stairs, Henri watches his wife intently as she stares at Pierre, suspicious of his wife. Henri breaks into her locked cupboard and finds all the naked pictures Pierre had taken of her as well as the letters they had written to one another. That night, he waits for Marie to finish bathing and tries to speak to her but accidentally drags the robe off of her. When he sees her naked, he's unable to control himself and starts kissing her, dragging them both to the ground. While he does this, he tries to tell her that Pierre didn't love her and was only using her for her body. Marie is upset and pushes Henri off of her, telling him that she doesn't love him. Although she knew there was truth in what her husband said, Marie wants to find out for herself and heads to Pierre's house where she finds him and his friend watching Zora dance naked, tantalized by her movement. Upset by the sight, she runs out before anyone could see her. The next time she's in bed with Pierre, Marie starts to cry, which makes him beg her to stop crying because of him. Getting up from the bed, he tries to take a picture of her but she covers herself up. Seeing that she was distressed, Pierre chooses Marie and decides to send Zora away. After being kicked out of Pierre's house, Zora finds Marie and confronts her about forcing her lover to send her home. She tells Marie that he would come back to her because she does whatever he wants, but Marie assures the woman that he would not because he was in love with her. Following her up to the apartment, Zora sits in front of Marie and tells her everything Pierre likes to do while being intimate. Zora then seduces the innocent woman, showing her things she had never done before. Although she had been a burden, Pierre misses Zora and confides this to his friend Henri, who tells him that he might be in love. Refusing to admit the allegations, Pierre assures him that it had only been a passion. Later that day, Pierre spends his afternoon photographing Marie and lays down next to her for a nap. The next morning, Marie goes out to get the mail and is devastated when she sees a letter from Pierre to Zora, expressing that he wanted to be in Algeria with her and that he would see her soon. By the time she reaches his apartment, she finds that he has already left. Days after his departure, Marie remains in bed, trying to cope with the loss of her lover. Marie's mother comes over to visit and tells Henri to try and take her daughter out of the house so she feels more relaxed. Henri expresses his worry about her constant refusal to leave the room. In the following days, Marie regains her strength and re-enters society, meeting Jean in a jewelry shop. After flirting with him for a while, he offers that she become his mistress, which she wholeheartedly agrees. Marie then writes Pierre a poem describing the incident, which in return he writes for her not to go through with it, and promises to return soon, professing his undying love. The day she receives the letter from Pierre, she informs Jean that their relationship is now over and that he should not waste a tear on her. Obsessed by the beautiful Marie and unable to take the rejection, Jean commits suicide. When Pierre returns to the apartment, he finds dozens of pictures of Marie and Jean being intimate in his home. Pierre is angry by what he finds and the loss of his friend, which makes him refuse to see Marie despite her continued pleading. One afternoon, Henri, Jose Maria, and Pierre are speaking together when Henri reveals that Marie was with her child. Henri and Pierre share a secret look that explains what they both knew. Henri offers the role of godfather to Pierre and even suggests that they call the child by his name if it turns out to be a boy. Despite her mother's assurances, Marie continues to miss her lover and persists with her letters. She explains in one of them that she is sure the child is his and begs him to respond to her letters. Months later, the child is born and is named Pierre after his secret father, who continues to avoid Marie. Henri notices the continuous depressed state of his wife and decides to speak with Pierre on her behalf. Finally convincing the stubborn man, he sets up a meeting in the park and Marie tears up from happiness when she sees him. Henri leaves the two alone to talk for a few minutes and Marie introduces her son to Pierre, who is excited to see his little boy. Pierre tells Marie that he loves her, which makes her happier than she had been in months. Once Henri returns, the group heads to the zoo where Pierre takes pictures of the beautiful Marie and his son. After sending the women away, Henri asks Pierre if he thought he was pitiful for allowing everything to happen, but Pierre disagrees, telling him that he was a compassionate man. When he hears his friend's words, Henri gets the courage to ask his friend for a favor. Although he would never be able to experience Marie's body, he wanted to feel what it would be like and asked Pierre to let him sit in the next room while he and his wife were intimate. Agreeing to make his friend happy, Pierre takes Marie to his apartment and they sleep together while Henri listens intently from the opposite room. That night, the married couple seem more comfortable with each other as they sit in their living room and read. Suddenly, they hear their door being knocked on and find out that Marie's mother had come over to visit. After Henri leaves them to speak in private, her mother tells her that her younger sister, Louise, would like to get married but only has eyes for Pierre. Surprised by the news, Marie tells her mother that Louise would never be happily married to such a man who had many mistresses and traveled a lot. But her mother explains that it was Louise's decision. The next day, Marie sends her sister to speak to Pierre and she seduces him into sleeping with her. That afternoon, Pierre confronts Marie about the trickery, but she assures him that it was all his decision and that it was he that chose to sleep with Louise, now forcing him to marry her. Marie tells Pierre that she loves him enough to share him and that the marriage he would have with her sister would bring them closer. She whispers seductive secrets into his ears and lures him into her plan. In the days to come, the family gets ready for the wedding between Louise and Pierre while Marie keeps her promise and lets him photograph her and her sister naked. Pierre seems enticed by the whole ordeal and cannot get enough of it. The continuous exposure of his eyes to the photo-producing chemicals starts to damage Pierre's eyes and he is forced into bed rest, his eyes thoroughly covered. Marie publishes her first book under a man's pen name, which becomes a huge success. After speaking to her publisher about her newfound fame, Marie walks back home with a smile on her face, finally satisfied.